So we're about a third of the way through reading The Fall by Albert Camus. It's quite a short novel as novels go, but it does take a while to read a whole novel. And this one is one that particularly lends itself to reading because it is all spoken dialogue. There's nothing in it which is an unnamed narrator or an author just giving an account of other actions or internal thoughts of any person or any scenery. It's all dialogue, and between two people, although we only really hear one of them. We know the other one's there because the one we do hear refers to him and answers questions from him from time to time, but we never actually hear his voice. So you could say that it's a monologue because we only hear the one character. So then who or what is this person? He calls himself Jean-Baptiste Clemenceau at one stage, but then later he says, well, of course I didn't tell you my real name. So who is he really? So hands up those who think he's the devil. Certainly there are a lot of indicators that suggest that. So there is just that mysterious origin of his that we don't really understand, so that's one point. He has this kind of sarcastic mannerism, almost sardonic you might say, and he likes to make fun of people, particularly people that he would regard as simple and uncomplicated, like the bartender of the bar that he frequents, whom he calls the gorilla. And also he likes to associate with people that he would see as more cultured and intellectual. And the other member of the dialogue he regards as someone like that and perhaps flatters him by suggesting that he's that sort of person. George Bernard Shaw, who was the English playwright of the early 20th century, depicted the devil as being like that. In one of his plays he has Don Juan go down to hell and visit the devil, who's a kind of a witty, learned, sort of jaded, world-weary kind of character. And I think Bernard Shaw himself probably would have liked to think of himself like that. And I'm sure the devil is capable of projecting himself in that way, even if that's not really his true nature, but he could certainly come across that way to people that would be attracted to that. So this character does that to some extent. He also, Jean-Baptiste Clemenceau, if that's what his name is, is capable of self-mockery. He sort of laughs at himself and his liking for fine language and such things. I don't know whether the real devil, is capable of self-mockery or any sort of self-criticism. That's probably part of his tragedy, that he can't really do that, although he probably could pretend to do it, and he's probably quite capable of acting that way if it suits his purpose and if that's going to appeal to a certain kind of person. So this character is a lawyer. He really has a disdain for judges. And at one stage he says he can't believe that any person could actually dare to take on the role of a judge. We know that Lucifer came under the most severe judgment, and from the only person, really, the only being who could truly be said to be able to judge anyone else because he himself has no fault. That one who really is the only one capable of casting the first stone. So that judge, this character just can't abide, I suppose, really. He is a lawyer, but we know from the Bible that Satan is described as the accuser, the persecutor, I suppose. But this character conspicuously distances himself from that role and takes on the role of a defender. So I'm not quite sure what he's saying there, but that's an interesting point. He also talks about his love of heights and his horror of depths. He says at one stage that the only place he could really feel comfortable is somewhere up high in the air, maybe 1,500 feet above the sea, looking out over a big vista. So high places are mentioned a lot in the Bible also. When the kingdom of Israel retreated back into its pagan Canaanite religious practices, which it did from time to time, and reverted to all its kind of grotesque sexual perversions and its hideously cruel child sacrifices, the same sort of things that the leaders of our world are doing all the time at the moment. So when they did that, they did it on these high places, these elevated mountains all around the country of Israel. So high places have been associated with the worship of demons, I suppose. The Cathars were a prominent heresy in the Middle Ages that fell foul of the church, and they practiced their religion mainly in the Pyrenees area, mountain ranges in southern France. I guess the Himalayas are the highest of all the high places, and Madame Blavatsky, who introduced Theosophy into the Western world, I've referred to her, quoted her quite extensively in one of my books, Best of Times, Worst of Times. She claimed to have downloaded all her information from these ascended masters who apparently lived in the Himalayas. So whether she actually went to the Himalayas or not, I don't know, but that's where she claimed to have got this information from. And then Switzerland, of course, now the home of the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the central banks. They were all established in this little mountain top enclave, the highest part of Europe. So when they set fire to all the rest of Europe, they made sure they had a secure base above that where they weren't going to be harmed and where they could commune with whatever it is they wanted to commune with. So the high places are something this character really loves, and on the other hand, he just has this horror and dread of dungeons and caves and depths. Can't understand how anyone would want to go and explore a cave. And again, from the Bible, we know that at one time Satan is bound for a long time in a deep pit. What else about him? There's that's right. He describes himself as being, at one stage, he has this feeling that he's a king's son, and he feels himself as being uniquely gifted with all sorts of particular attributes and qualities. And at one stage, interestingly, he says that he doesn't feel that he earned any of those things or attained them through anything of his own, but he was just given them, just decreed them. And certainly we know that about Lucifer, that he was the highest of the angels, and God had given him particular gifts that, more than any of the others, just granted them to him. And that's the feeling that this character seems to have, and probably rightly so. There's just the name of the story itself, The Fall. The fall of man we know about was the catastrophe when Adam and Eve made their big mistake. And the Bible also talks about the fall of Lucifer when he rebelled against God and fell from heaven. So it's hard to escape the idea that this character is somehow representing, or we're meant to think that he might be the devil. And if that's so, then why is Albert Camus saying that? I mean, that we're talking about spiritual things, about supernatural realms. And Camus, surely, if he was anything, was an atheist. So why is he even talking about this and suggesting this? Anyway, but that's something we're going to come to that later. when we look at some of his other books about what what his ideas about life and the world were. But it's just interesting at this point that he's sort of creating this idea that this character is something, maybe Satan himself. So we'll get back to the story next week anyway.